Um, Imagine a single nation trying to manage this massive political upheaval,
Right.
along with the Byzantine international labor crisis and, astronomical fuel prices.
It's a lot all at once.
It really is. And all of this is happening while millions of citizens are literally pulling these 500-year-old wooden chariots through the streets to celebrate a new year. Welcome to the Nepali Diaspora Network podcast, your go-to source for news, views, and insights for Nepalese worldwide.
Glad to be here for this one.
Yeah, so you're joining us for our deep dive into the latest Nepali Diaspora Digest. We're covering week 15, so that's April 4th through the 10th of 2026. And today, we are looking at a stack of sources that paint this crazy picture of a country where modern crises are just colliding head-on with ancient resilience.
Yeah, it's a landscape that is shifting on almost every single front. I mean, the economic, political, and social tectonic plates in Nepal, they're really grinding against each other right now in ways that demand some serious attention.
Okay, let's unpack this, starting with what honestly feels like a political earthquake. So on April 7th, the Supreme Court drew a massive line in the sand regarding these recent high-profile arrests.
Yeah, they did.
They actually ordered the release of former Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli and former Home Minister Ramesh Lekhak. Now, I know they were arrested in connection with the Gari Bahadur Karki Commission's investigation, right?
Right, into the September 2025 Gen Z protests.
Exactly, that crackdown where 76 people tragically lost their lives. But, they had already spent 13 days in judicial custody. So why did the Supreme Court suddenly step in right now?
Well, what's fascinating here is the sharp distinction the judiciary is forcing the government to make. They're separating political momentum from actual legal accountability.
Interesting.
Yeah, because the Balen administration, they came in with this massive mandate to clean house, right? And putting high-profile figures behind bars quickly, it sends a really strong message.
Sure, shows they're taking action.
Exactly, but the Supreme Court essentially told the executive branch, hey, due process is non-negotiable. The law in Nepal limits exactly how long you can hold someone in judicial custody without, actually completing an investigation.
Right, you can't just lock them up indefinitely.
No, you can't. So the court's ruling was super straightforward. They said either complete the investigation and formally charge them or release them by April 9th. And, well, the deadline passed, so they walked out on bail.
Okay, but just to be clear here, because I know the headlines have been incredibly noisy about this.
No, absolutely.
Walking out on bail does not mean the investigation is over.
Right.
Like, they aren't cleared.
Not at all. No, that is a really crucial nuance. The release is not an acquittal. The charges of criminal negligence amounting to reckless homicide, those absolutely still stand.
Okay, good to clarify.
Yeah. The investigation remains open. It's just that the judiciary is ensuring the state's power to detain people isn't being used as a tool for, indefinite political leverage.
Well, the political fallout from this release seems incredibly volatile already. I mean, the CPN-UML didn't just quietly welcome their leader back.
Definitely not.
They are treating this as an act of war. They announced a 2-week nationwide protest campaign starting April 11th, and they're calling the arrests illegitimate and political revenge.
Right.
Meanwhile, the Nepali Congress has been just strikingly silent.
Yeah.
And looking at the electoral numbers from March, I mean, they paint a brutal picture for these legacy parties. Could you break down the math for us really quick?
Yeah, the math really explains the desperation here. The old political establishment has been functionally decimated.
Wow.
Yeah. Nepali Congress was reduced to just 38 seats. I mean, party president Gagan Thapa even lost his own constituency.
That's huge.
And the UML collapsed to a mere 25 seats. Now, sitting across from them is Balen Shah's Rastriya Swatantra Party, the RSP. And they're holding a 182-seat supermajority.
That is just a massive shift in power.
It really is. And inside the UML, Ram Bahadur Thapa has taken over as parliamentary leader. He recently gave this speech blaming the army, the police, and civil servants for their electoral defeat.
Really? Blaming everyone else?
Yeah, it reveals a party completely untethered from the new political reality. They're just struggling to understand why voters abandoned them.
I have to push back on something here, though. I mean, it's really easy to look at the legacy parties right now, see them protesting in the streets or making excuses, and just write them off as sore losers clinging to relevance.
Sure, I can see that.
But isn't a democracy without a functioning opposition inherently dangerous? To me, it's like driving a high-speed car, which is this RSP supermajority right now, without any brakes. You might be making great time, but the moment you hit a blind curve and need to course correct, you are in serious trouble.
I agree completely. A healthy democracy absolutely requires friction. It requires a robust opposition to scrutinize policy and, slow down bad ideas. But because the legacy parties are currently so focused on their own survival, they just aren't providing that structural pushback in parliament. And we are already seeing the new government make some rapid, chaotic moves that desperately need scrutiny.
Yeah, like I was reading about that Press Freedom Row. The government issued this directive requiring all ministries to publish notices exclusively through state-owned media.
Right, shutting out the independent outlets.
Exactly. The Federation of Nepali Journalists is up in arms because this policy essentially threatens the survival of rural radio stations. I mean, they depend almost entirely on local government advertising just to keep the lights on.
And it's not just the media. We also saw the education minister, Sasmita Pokharel, announce a sudden, complete ban on bridge courses and entrance prep classes.
Wait, a complete ban?
Yeah. But then 2 hours later, after immense public confusion, she did a rapid U-turn. She narrowed the ban to classes up to grade 12 only, and the original statement was just quietly scrubbed from the ministry's website.
Oh, wow. That is chaotic.
Right. Combine that with Friday's swift cabinet expansion, bringing in 2 new Madhesi lawmakers for labor and industry, and you have a political machinery grinding incredibly fast, but with significant turbulence.
And that domestic turbulence, the historical lack of opportunity and stability caused by years of this exact kind of political gridlock, that's the reason why 1.7 million Nepalese have been forced to seek work abroad.
Absolutely. It's a direct pipeline.
Which brings us to a crisis that is far more dire than political maneuvering in Kathmandu. We really need to talk about the deeply heartbreaking situation unfolding in the Gulf right now. I was reading the reports. The human reality of this is just staggering.
It's awful.
Nepalese workers are essentially trapped. What is the actual scale of what is happening on the ground there?
Well, the scale is devastating. As of this week, the bodies of 38 deceased Nepalese workers are stranded across the Middle East.
Oh my God, 38.
Yeah. There are 17 in Riyadh, 15 in Dubai, and 5 in Jeddah. And they cannot be brought home because the ongoing U.S.-Israel-Iran conflict has severely disrupted commercial flight routes across the entire region.
That is just tragic. So were these deaths directly from the conflict?
It is important to clarify that, actually. Only 1 Nepalese citizen was killed directly by the conflict itself. The other 37 passed away from other causes, like workplace accidents or sudden illnesses.
I see.
But because the airspace is paralyzed, their families in Nepal are enduring these agonizing waits of over a month just to receive their loved ones' remains for proper last rites.
The anxiety for those families must be completely unbearable. I know the government set up an online evacuation platform. Do we know how many people are actually trying to get out?
The numbers are huge. The government's platform has registered 86,420 Nepalese citizens requesting immediate evacuation.
Wow, over 86,000.
Yes. The Foreign Ministry has formed a new 8-member panel to recommend a protection strategy. But an analysis in Spotlight Nepal this week highlighted a pretty bitter truth about all this.
Okay.
It's a profound systemic failure. I mean, Nepal essentially built its modern economy by exporting labor to the Gulf, but consecutive governments never bothered to build the consular or institutional infrastructure to protect those workers when regional stability collapses.
Yeah, we celebrate the remittance numbers every single quarter, right? Politicians use those numbers to prove the economy is growing, but they completely ignore the human collateral.
Exactly.
It's like outsourcing your city's entire water supply to a neighboring country, but never laying down the pipes to bring it back safely if a drought hits. The money flows, but the protection just doesn't exist.
It's a great way to put it. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the economic shockwaves of this labor disruption are already hitting Kathmandu.
How bad is it looking?
Well, the World Bank just released its April 2026 update. It's ominously titled Growth Under Pressure. They have taken Nepal's FY26 GDP growth forecast and literally slashed it in half.
Half? What's the new number?
Down to just 2.3%. And the Asian Development Bank followed suit, cutting their projection to 2.7%.
Slashing a national growth forecast in half is massive. What is the specific mechanism driving that downgrade? Like, why the sudden drop?
It comes down to structural reliance. Gulf countries alone contribute 41% of Nepal's total remittances.
Okay.
And those total remittances make up an astonishing 28.6% of the entire national GDP. So a prolonged war in the Middle East doesn't just mean grounded flights.
Right, and the money stops moving.
Exactly. It means delayed financial transfers, reduced earnings as businesses in the Gulf slow down, and ultimately a massive drop in domestic consumption back in Nepal.
That makes perfect sense.
And when you combine that looming drop in cash flow with the lingering 86 billion rupees in infrastructure damages from those September protests, the national economy is sitting on a knife's edge.
And it isn't just the Middle East either. Nepalese abroad are facing tightening borders everywhere. Like in the United States, the Supreme Court is currently hearing lawsuits regarding temporary protected status, or TPS.
Right, the TPS program.
Yeah, that designation has allowed thousands of Nepalese to live and work in the U.S., but those lawsuits threaten over 7,000 people. We've already seen 585 deportations just since the start of the year.
That's a huge disruption for those families.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And over Australia, they recently designated Nepal as a level 3 visa risk. That policy change means Nepalese students now have to show proof of almost 30,000 Australian dollars up front just to secure a visa.
Wow, 30,000.
Up front. The global avenues that citizens have historically relied upon for education and income, they're narrowing all at once.
And when the diaspora struggles, the immediate casualty is the domestic cost of living. Fewer remittances mean less foreign currency reserves, which weakens purchasing power.
Right.
And that directly fuels the inflation we're seeing inside Nepal right now, particularly at the fuel pumps.
Oh, the fuel shock is hitting every single household. I was looking at the current pump prices in Kathmandu, and petrol has been hiked 4 times in a single month.
4 times! Unbelievable.
It is now sitting between 216.50 and 219 rupees per liter. But the jump in diesel is what really caught my eye. Can you explain the sheer scale of this price hike and why diesel specifically is so dangerous for the broader economy?
Yeah, diesel has jumped an incredible 47% in just 5 weeks. It's currently sitting between 204.50 and 207 rupees per liter. And the reason it's so dangerous is that diesel is the foundational cost of a developing economy.
Because of transportation.
Exactly. It powers the trucks that move food, the buses that move people, and the generators that run factories. When diesel jumps 47%, that cost cascades into literally everything.
So everyone feels it immediately.
They do. The Department of Transport Management was forced to approve a 16.71% increase in public transport fares. Cargo rates on hill routes have surged over 21.68%. Economists are warning that this single supply chain shock could push overall national inflation up by a full 2 percentage points.
Now, I saw the cabinet actually try to intervene on this. They announced a 50% cut on customs duty and the infrastructure tax on petroleum.
They did announce that, yes.
And when you read that headline, it sounds like massive relief for the public. And here's where it gets really interesting. Consumers aren't seeing a single paisa of that tax cut at the pump. Why is fuel still so expensive if the government slashed the tax by 50%?
Because the state-owned monopoly, the Nepal Oil Corporation, or NOC, is intercepting those savings.
It is so frustrating to read about.
Yeah.
Like it's like your landlord giving you a 50% rent reduction to help you through a tough month. But the property manager intercepts the check and pockets the difference because the building's maintenance fund is supposedly in the red.
That is precisely what is happening. The NOC is sitting on massive accumulated losses from heavily subsidizing fuel in the past. So to balance their own historical debt, they are absorbing the government's tax cut entirely.
Wow.
It helps the state's ledger look better on paper, but it does absolutely nothing for the family trying to buy a few liters of petrol to get to work today.
So what does this all mean for the long-term outlook? Is it just endless inflation and debt? Is there any good news?
Well, to be fair to the macroeconomic data, the World Bank report did highlight one major silver lining, and that's domestic energy.
Oh, right. Hydropower.
Yeah. Electricity generation in Nepal is actually up 22.74%. And the government is aggressively leaning into this transition. They just approved a new legal framework for converting petrol and diesel vehicles to electric.
That's a step in the right direction.
It is. They are also expanding the EV charging network to roughly 270 stations across the country. So the short-term picture with imported fossil fuels is agonizing, but Nepal's long-term transition to domestic hydropower is remarkably strong.
That's great to hear.
And we are even seeing strange resilience in the markets. I mean, NEPSE, the stock exchange, just had its best week in months, closing at 2,851.24. And major infrastructure projects like the Kathmandu-Terai Fast Track, they're holding steady at 43.6% completion.
It is that incredible Nepalese duality,
Yeah.
The macroeconomic numbers look terrifying, the political scene is super volatile, and the global labor market is locking down. Yet the daily rhythm of the country simply keeps pushing forward.
Yeah, life goes on.
I think the perfect illustration of this is what is happening right now in Bhaktapur.
Oh, the Bisket Jatra festival.
Yes, Naya Barsha 2083, the Nepalese New Year, arrives on April 14th. And right now, the 9-day Bisket Jatra festival is just taking over Bhaktapur.
It's quite the sight.
The sheer scale of it is breathtaking. You have these massive, towering wooden chariots carrying the idols of Kalbhairav and Bhadrakali, and they're being pulled through these narrow ancient streets in a giant tug-of-war.
Yeah, and they erect the lingo, right?
Exactly. They are erecting and then toppling a 25-meter wooden pole, the lingo, in Pottery Square. And then over in Timi, you have the Sindoor Jatra, where the entire town is drenched in bright orange vermilion powder.
It is visually stunning, but culturally it really serves as the anchor of the year. It grounds the entire nation.
I just find the contrast so striking. You look at Nepal today, you have a 35-year-old rapper running the government, making policy announcements by social media, and this massive national push to transition to electric vehicles. And at the exact same time, a 500-year-old festival completely stops a major city. The central rituals haven't changed in generations. While politicians argue over constitutional law and supermajorities, the people are physically pulling their history through the streets.
It is a really powerful reminder of what endures beyond the daily news cycle. You know, the culture persists regardless of who sits in parliament.
It really does. And speaking of things that endure, exams.
Oh, yes, the exams.
Over 517,000 students are currently wrapping up their secondary education examinations, the CE. It is a massive, stressful milestone for 500,000 families right now.
It's a huge deal.
And I was really glad to see that for the second year in a row, female candidates actually outnumbered males. But the real structural change this year is a grading process, right?
Yes, the National Examination Board finally decentralized the grading system. Previously, all the answer sheets were funneled to central hubs, which just created this massive bureaucratic bottleneck.
I can imagine.
Now, they are checking answer sheets directly at localized exam centers. And by changing that simple logistical mechanism, they are projecting that results will be published in a record 1 month.
Wow. What was it before?
It used to be an agonizing historical average of 79 days.
Okay, that is a huge quality of life improvement. Students and families can actually plan their next steps without sitting in limbo for nearly 3 months.
Absolutely.
But, you know, this actually makes me wonder about the broader system. The government has this huge digital governance push happening right now. They've promised to clear a massive backlog of 2.9 million driver's licenses by mid-July.
Right, that's a big promise.
And now we have these faster C results. Are we finally seeing the notoriously slow bureaucratic machinery of Nepal actually speed up for the average citizen?
Well, we have to separate the government's ambition from strict mathematical reality here. With the license backlog, for instance, they have shifted away from relying on foreign contractors and moved to domestic mass printing.
Okay, so that should be faster.
In theory, yes. The new facilities have the capacity to print 40,000 cards a day. If you do the math, 2.9 million licenses divided by 40,000 cards a day takes about 72 days.
And what's the deadline?
The government's deadline is roughly 85 days away. So, theoretically, it is possible.
It's like it'll be close.
Very close. Because that calculation leaves absolutely zero margin for error. It assumes no power outages, no machine breakdowns, and no supply chain issues with the blank cards.
Yeah, and that's a big assumption.
It is. The ambition to serve the citizen is finally there, but the mechanical execution of that promise is what we really have to watch closely over the next few months.
We will definitely be keeping an eye on whether they can actually hit that deadline. Now, just before we wrap up today, we have to mention some genuine sports pride. The Rhinos are back in action.
Yes. Cricket.
The ICC World Cup League 2 Tri-Series against Oman and the UAE is kicking off in Kirtipur on April 25th. And this series is absolutely crucial for the 2027 World Cup qualification.
It really is. And a strong home performance at the stadium in Bhaktapur is exactly what the country needs right now. Sports just have this unique, almost magical way of cutting through the political noise and economic anxiety, you know. It unites everyone under a single banner.
I completely agree. Well, for you, our listener, before we let you go, we want to give a quick, friendly shout-out to our partners at Baleat.uk.
Great platform.
It really is. If you are part of the Nepalese community living in the UK, this is a fantastic, genuinely helpful classifieds platform. Whether you are actively looking for jobs, hunting for housing, trying to find local community events, or just wanting to support local Nepalese-owned businesses, Balayat.uk is the place to connect.
Yeah, it's an excellent resource for staying connected abroad.
Exactly. It is entirely about community supporting community, and we highly recommend checking it out. And to read the full, in-depth newsletter we pulled from today, and to get all the latest updates, deep dives, and diaspora resources, make sure you visit nepladiaspora.net. From all of us here, Naya Barsha, 2083 Kohardik Shupakamana, we wish a very happy new year to you and yours.
Yeah, Happy New Year. But this raises an important question, though, as we look ahead to this new year. We see 1.7 million Nepalese working abroad, sending home the wealth that essentially sustains the entire domestic economy.
Right.
But as the Gulf crisis exposes the sheer vulnerability of relying on foreign labor markets, and as the domestic push for electric vehicles shows a glimpse of true economic self-reliance, what happens to Nepal's political identity when the diaspora inevitably stops just sending remittances and starts demanding a real structural return on their investment in the nation's future?